Good afternoon and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm Anthony Gray, Club President. Thank you all for being here with us today. Please remain standing for the opening patriotic song. Bob Dindorf will lead us in singing My Country, 'Tis of Thee.
Thank you, President Anthony. The pressure's on everybody because we don't have a piano player today. So listen. Got it? My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Muy bien.
Thank you, Bob. Today's meeting is sponsored by Darren Harris and Jennifer Ginsburg. Darren and Jennifer, would you please stand? Jennifer is sponsoring on behalf of Safe Harbor Child Advocacy Center, and Darren is sponsoring on behalf of Journey of Collaboration. Journey of Collaboration equips leaders and organizations to unlock the full potential of groups through transformative workshops, coaching, consulting. They spark innovation and lasting impact. Together they can unleash group power and shape a more collaborative future. Please check out the flyers on your table to learn more and set up a free consultation. Journey of Collaboration is proud to recognize April as Child Abuse Awareness Month, along with their partners at Safe Harbor Child Advocacy Center, which serves children 13 to 18 who have been victims of sexual and physical abuse, internet exploitation, and trafficking, as well as witnessing domestic violence and other violent crimes. Law enforcement and child protective services bring the child to Safe Harbor's child-friendly Center for Trauma-Informed Forensic Interview, Advocacy, Crisis Intervention, and Trauma Treatment. Safe Harbor coordinates with multidisciplinary teams that include child abuse, so no child falls through the cracks. Since 1999, Safe Harbor has served over 600 children. At Safe Harbor, every child is heard and supported as they begin their journey towards healing and hope. Our thanks to Darren and Jennifer for their generous support of today's meeting. We now welcome Scott Forrester to the podium, and he will introduce today's guests.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce the guests. When I read your name, please stand up. Rex Boyce, guest of Chris Laurent. Michael Domnitz, guest of Jennifer Ginsburg. Sarah Clemmy, guest of Rowan Childs. Chris Laurent, guest of Chris Laurent. Alexis London, guest of Robin Ryan. Fred Marshall, guest of Cheryl Cato. Robin Matthias, guest of Jen Savino. Rita Mae Reese, guest of Tom Pop. Jordan Rosuski, guest of Jen Savino. Aaron Seiler, guest of Chris Laurent. J.R. Sims, guest of Janet Pereno. Jenny Sullivan, guest of John Hayes. Michelle Sweet, guest of Jen Savino. Judy Topitzas, guest of Nick Topitzas. And welcome all our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Janine O'Rourke, who will become our president in the 28-29 calendar year, or club year, also serves as co-chair of this year's Rotary Scholar Mentorship Committee. She's going to come up and make a brief announcement about that committee. Janine, welcome.
Good afternoon. So for many years, our Rotary Club has given scholarships to graduating high school seniors, and many of those seniors do not have someone in their life that has the experience of having gone through university. And so what our club does is we ask people to offer to be a mentor for them. This might be only one visit for all of their college years, if that's all they need, or it could be something where you meet with them on many times during the year, and that's what we hope, because that's what you get more out of on both sides. So there's a form on your table. We will be matching up our next class of graduating scholars with for those who are interested in a mentor, and we need some of you to offer to be those mentors. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. We now welcome Laura Peck to the podium. She's our club's bylaw advisor, and she has a brief announcement for the club. Welcome.
Very exciting. If you were here last week, you heard about this. We're changing our proposing to change our bylaws to change the makeup of our director and officer nominating committees to include the president-elect nominee, which apparently was not part of this. The president-elect nominee was, that position was formed in 2022. It's part of the hierarchy of our members as they move toward becoming president. So we've got on your table flyers that show the change to the bylaws. All the nerds can go ahead and read that. You can you can contact the office or me if you have any questions, and President Anthony will call for a vote next week. That's all.
Thank you, Laura. We now welcome the chair of our Member Recognition Committee, Joyce Bromley, to the podium, and she'll come forward and introduce a member with one of this year's service awards.
Thank you, President Anthony.
Welcome, Joyce.
Get this right. Our Member Recognition Committee and our club's board of directors selects 6 members each year to receive an Avenue of Service Award in recognition of their service above self and also on behalf of our club. Today we honor Lester Pines with an Avenue of Service Award for sharing his vocational skills with our club since joining in 2011. Lester is a founding member of the Pine-Spock LLP, where he has practiced law for 50 years. He has been a distinguished attorney in general civil, employment, and criminal defense cases, and he has received numerous awards for his work. Just last month, the Wisconsin Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters named him among this year's recipients of their Fellows Award for his demonstration of a lifelong commitment to intellectual discourse and public service. For 25 years, the club has benefited from Lester's exceptional legal expertise. In a profession where time is often the most limited resource, time and again, he has stepped up to volunteer his time without hesitation, working behind the scenes with quiet dedication. At a moment's notice, whether facing urgent challenges, complex questions, or unexpected crises, Lester has consistently been there to offer sound and steady guidance. In recognition of his ongoing dedication to our club, we are honored to present him with the 2026 Rotary Club of Madison Vocational Service Award. Lester, please come forward so we may congratulate you while Anthony presents you with a certificate and an award pin in recognition of your contributions.
Our Adopt a School Committee invites interested Rotary members to volunteer at Henderson Elementary School for their Finding Nemo Kids production set for May 14th and 15th. They are seeking volunteers who will help with costumes, tickets, ushering, photography, as well as donations of water and baked goods. There's an orange-colored flyer on each of your tables, so pick one up if you're interested in registering to assist. We now have some birthdays to celebrate with a bit of wisdom or humor that complements Rotary's mission. We encourage members to make a gift to our foundation's Community Grants Endowment Fund that represents their age, rounded up to 100 for our Synergy Scholarship Fund. April 5th, Loretta Himmelsbach, who shares this quote from Oscar Wilde: "The smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention." April 6th, Dave Baskerville, who shares this message: "If Rotarians are, quote, hard up for something to do on Saturday, May 16th, from 1 to 4, you are most welcome to attend my wife, Inez, and my's 70th wedding anniversary open house at Monona Terrace." April 7th, Robert Reed. April 8th, Keisha Harrison. April 8th, Ralph Cotton. April 8th, George Keene. April 10, Clement Abangwa. April 10, Frank Stein. April 11, my friend Ed Futa, who is the former General Secretary of Rotary International. Thanks to our celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Community Grants Endowment Fund. Please join me in wishing them the very happiest of birthdays. And without accompaniment, I guess we just, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you. We want our members to see our current board members, so we ask one board member to introduce a speaker each month. This month, Joy Cardine will make the introduction of our speaker. Joy is a former talk show host at Wisconsin Public Radio. She joined our Rotary Club in 2022 and is in the first of her 2-year term on our board. Joy, welcome to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, President Anthony. It's my honor to introduce our speaker for today. He is Dr. Qiang Chang. He has been the director of the Waisman Center at the UW-Madison since 2018 and has also been a professor of medical genetics and neurology since 2007. Dr. Chung earned his bachelor's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology from Peking University in Beijing, China, and his PhD in neurosciences from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He completed postdoctoral training at Children's Hospital of Boston, Harvard Medical School, and the Whitehead Institute at MIT. His laboratory focuses on DNA methylation-dependent epigenetic regulation of brain development and function. With a particular emphasis on uncovering the molecular mechanisms underlying Rett syndrome, a rare autism spectrum-associated neurodevelopmental disorder. In other words, he knows his stuff. We look forward to your presentation, Dr. Chung, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking to us today. I also want to mention that we will have Q&A with our speaker at the end as time allows, but please wait for a microphone if you have a question. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Qiang Chang to our podium.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, Joy, for that very kind introduction, and thank you all for having me here today. Very happy to talk about something that is very important to many of us. And I have to admit that this is a very complex topic, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice in just 30 minutes. So I thought I would just go overview with some important points, and very happy to through the question and answer and maybe even follow-up discussion and communication to get into more depth with anything you guys are interested on this particular topic. And as Joy said, I've been the director of the Waisman Center, and what's on the slide is the people we care about at the Waisman Center and what our mission is, basically to advance knowledge in human development, in particular brain and the brain conditions associated with it across the entire lifespan. And the way we do it at the, try this. Okay, it was working from that direction. Okay, so maybe I did something to it. If you could advance for me?
Can you advance for me?
Yeah. So it's somehow not advancing. Okay, so at the Waisman Center, the way we do this is a very unique approach. We do research, clinical service, training education, and community service in an integrated way to address many of these complex topics. And autism is one of the conditions that we are interested in, and we do a lot of work on that topic through these different activities and in a very integrated way. So really, what is autism? This is a clinical diagnosis. It has different names. You hear autism, you hear autism spectrum disorders. They're the same thing. Autism spectrum disorder is just the formal clinical definition, and autism is a more common term people uses. And what it is a lifelong condition that is associated with persistent social communication interaction deficits accompanied by restricted and repetitive patterns of activity, interest, and behavior. And it's a very broad term. It's a spectrum. And it's highly heterogeneous. And this is going to be important for some of the topics I'll touch on later. So this is a quote from a parent with an autism individual. So basically what it says is that if you've seen one autism individual, you have seen one. It's highly heterogeneous. They're very, very different. You can have someone who are not verbal, can say anything, but someone who basically is so sophisticated and eloquent than a college professor. And what it means is that people with this condition, their needs are going to be very, very different. So this is important when we think of ourselves as a center doing research, doing services, and trying to improve the quality of life of these individuals and their family, and also as a community when we think of people who need help with this condition. It's not a single need. Now, how do we serve them? That becomes a really mounting task, and then we have to really engage them broadly and to learn from them what they think is important to them. So this is how the condition gets diagnosed. Really, as I said, it's a clinical diagnosis, and the clinical providers do that. Typically, these are psychologists and psychiatrists. And this is the main test, a gold standard test that they use to diagnose these individuals. It's an observational test, ADOS-2, and breaking down into 4 different domains, and they score the individuals based on how they behave and respond in that assessment session. What I really want to emphasize, you can see at the bottom of the slide, is that this is not a quantitative measure where you have a threshold for diagnosis. It's not like you scored a 25 and then you get the diagnosis, you scored a 26, you don't. It is a judgment call. These physicians make that judgment call at the end of that session. And of course, with a condition that is so heterogeneous, so broad, there are going to be cases that are slam dunk, black and white, and then there's no question. But there are going to be many, many cases that are gray. And in the end, it comes to the judgment of that physician, and how it is diagnosed is going to have an impact on, later on when we discuss this, what causes the condition and why we have increasing prevalence of these this particular condition in the community over time, right? So when you think about who gets the label, this is really critical. It's a judgment call. And what I will spend much of the time today to talk about with some evidence and data is the epidemiology of autism. And this is not the web bench stuff that I typically do in my own lab, where we look at cells, we look at brains, we look at circuit, and we look at molecules to understand what changed and what could be a particular intervention to right the change process. This is at the population level. How do we look at how many people get this diagnosis, how many people has this condition, and how frequent it is, and what are the characteristics with these individuals, and look at the factors potentially associated with it, and to use this type of data to inform our understanding of the condition, and also, more importantly, to inform practices and policies. And this is really the discipline that we have some of the most prominent researchers at the Waisman Center. And this, on the next slide you will see, is a tradition we have here at Wisconsin. So basically, we're going to look at the data, the real data over time in terms of prevalence of autism across the nation and also in Wisconsin, and look at some of the factors that are known to be associated with this complex condition. And the reason I mentioned we have that history is because the very first epidemiology study of autism happened here in Wisconsin. So that was in the 1960s. This is Darrell Treffer's work, and at that time, what they found is very small number of children gets the diagnosis of autism. And if you look at the number, 280 cases out of these close to 900,000 children at the time, and that comes to about 0.3 individuals in 1,000. So 3 out of 10,000, that's a very, very small number and very small rate. And what's interesting then is that there is this sex difference, that 3.4 to 1 ratio, more likely in boys than girls. That's very interesting. Up to this day, this sex ratio persists across the nation, across the world. So this is a very interesting phenomenon that we do not have a full understanding of why yet. So the two major findings from 1960s, one of them stayed and the other one did not. So to look at how we get the data, the modern day data of prevalence of autism, we have to mention this ADDM network, the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network across the nation. So there is this Children's Health Act in 2000. It authorized the CDC to establish this national network to monitor the presence of autism in the communities across the nation. And you can see those green highlighted states. Those are the states with these ADDM network sites. And what is interesting, you will see later a slide, is that even in each of those states, when you have such a site, it doesn't, the catchment area of that site does not cover the entire state. So we're talking about epidemiology, we're talking about surveying, And keep that in mind when you think about the representativeness of the data collected by this network. But nonetheless, it covers quite a broad range across the nation. And they, starting from 2000, every 2 years, they release their data. And the data for 2000 was released on 2002, and data for 2002 was released 2 years later in 2004, so on and so forth. And these are the numbers, the prevalence of autism in the community from 2000 to 2022. That's the last release in 2024. So this year, they will have a release of the data from 2024. So one more data point this year will come out, and you can see that red line toward the left of the slide, that's 1960s. That prevalence number is very, very low compared to what we have now. This is a bar graph. This is the number graph for the people who are interested in looking at it. It's not just a single bar, and it's the real number per 1,000. And these are the different years. And what you can see in the second column to the right is that it gives the range. That range is across the site. You can see, I don't have a pointer here, if you look at the bottom line, 2022 number, and that range is quite big across these different states in the nation, right? You could go as low as a single-digit number per 1,000 children, go up to like 53. Per 1,000 children. So there even is quite a range across the state. And they're supposed to use the same method. So this might reflect different catchment area and so on and so forth and how you apply those methods. But unquestionably, the prevalence is going up. And I think that's why I was invited to talk here, why we have such a steep rise. And you can see here that's the breakdown by sex. And that ratio remained. Even when we see more and more, you still see about 3 to 4 over 1 ratio between boys and girls. And we could, go look at the key points of this report, right? So the sex ratio is there, and the prevalence is increasing. We had a 0.3 per 1,000. Now we're talking about 3.2 per 1,000. Even that acceleration is not slowing down. You look at from 2020 to 2022, that is still going up. And this is really important. And then to talk about the heterogeneity of these individuals, the characteristics of these individuals. So what we're seeing is about 30%, 40% of the individuals would have intellectual disability. So that's the more severe side of this condition. So if we talk about this within autism population, there is a large percentage of them with significant need, much more so than the other end of the spectrum. So that is really very important for us to keep in mind, is that we're not talking about necessarily neurodiverse and people who don't have as much challenge on their daily living. We have a large percentage of these individuals with really significant needs. And if we zoom in on Wisconsin, some of these characteristics remain. But what I want you to see here on this slide is the catchment area, right? So those green highlighted counties are for Wisconsin, where the numbers are coming from. You see the Milwaukee County, you see Waukesha, you see Dane. That's southeast Wisconsin, basically. So where the population centers are and where these numbers are coming from. And really, I want to emphasize this particular feature, so we have a better interpretation of the data we have. So let's look at possible explanations of this steep increase over time, right? So how do we go from 0.3 out of 1,000 to 3.2 out of 1,000 over time. And this is really where many of the factors, the epidemiology of autism, have looked at and have studied over time. And we could remember that it's a clinical diagnosis from early on. And what I want to say here is that this criteria changed over time to include a broad spectrum, meaning if we view autism as a basket, more items are being put into the basket, and then could explain why you have more cases over time. And the other important thing to keep in mind is that starting from 1990s, autism is the term in terms of special education at school that is being used more, being more accepted, and replacing previously, whether you say mental retardation or you say intellectual disability. So there's that change, and there's certainly quite a bit of epidemiology data to demonstrate that there is an association with this change in service availability in schools between that and the increase in prevalence of autism in the community. And also, there is increased awareness, not just in the community as we all are in, but also in terms of the clinical providers. They're more aware of this, and you can see, sorry, I don't have a pointer here, the expansion of the developmental screening recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics starting in 2005, 2006-ish. So that is where also that change in practice can be associated with the increase of prevalence. When you pay more attention to it, when you're more aware of it, then you're more likely to give a diagnosis. And but there's also some of these things called diagnosis substitution, and what you can see on the graph there is that what in the past, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, providers are giving a diagnosis of intellectual disability, that has been decreasing. But the label of autism has been increasing. And this is not a coincidence. This is basically a replacement of the terms the providers are giving individuals they observe in their clinics. And also there is the diagnostic accretion, and that's basically a change in practice where you don't just give individuals one label anymore. In the past, if you get a diagnosis of Fragile X, for example, you do not get a diagnosis of autism. They're mutually exclusive. You get just one. And now, more and more often, these providers are allowed to use additional labels on the same, to assign different additional labels to the same individual. So we know that about 40% of the individuals diagnosed with Fragile X have autism diagnosis. So there you can see that the same individuals get counted twice. They get counted as autism as well as Fragile X. So these are certainly factors that could explain some of the increase. Not a single factor could explain all of it, but then together certainly accounts for a large portion of the increase. And of course, there is potentially there's changes in risk factors and causes of this condition, potentially contributing to the increase in the prevalence of autism. And we can look at some of these factors, right? So there are studies from a while ago and also ongoing studies to look at really what are associated with the prevalence of autism. And these are just some of the factors that has been looked at. And we certainly know these factors changed over time. The preterm births, the low birth weight, where preterm births is associated would be that given the better and better improvement in healthcare, the mortality rate for the preterm births has dropped over time, and more of these individuals are surviving, and potentially that could be contributing to some of these increases in autism diagnosis. And in terms of the parental age, right? We all know that has been increasing, and these factors change over time, and their association with autism has been looked at already in studies. So this is one data slide. I promise this is the only data slide I will show you. A little bit complicated, but this is how I want to emphasize how this is looked at, right? So we look at odds ratio. The bar graphs are showing you the odds ratio of these different conditions, right? We can look at vaccine to the very far left end of it, and we can calculate odds ratio of these factors and look at their association with autism. And basically, you can break your study population into 4 parts, whether they have autism or not, whether they have been exposed to this particular factor or not. Vaccinated versus not vaccinated, autism versus no autism, and you can get the ABCDs counted, and then you can calculate the odds ratio using this particular formula, and you can see what the odds ratio is. And the general population is the odds ratio, that's basically the control, that's the baseline. And if you look at this, the vaccination is basically less risky than the general population in terms of association with autism. And you could do the same calculation. You just replace the vaccine with these other factors: parental age, preterm births, and the time between pregnancies. All of these factors have been looked at. You can look at these bars. And almost every single one of these factors have been shown to be having a higher odds ratio than 1, which means more likely to have autism. So I want to say this is association. Association doesn't equal causation. But if you have very, very strong association, that in the epidemiology term is a very strong indication of cause. And you can see the highest bar to the right is the monozygotic twin, identical twins, right? So autism has a very strong genetic contribution. Basically, if we do population genetic studies using twin studies to look at autism, we could, through many studies, we could say about 70% to 90% of this trait can be explained by genetics. So really, this is a way for epidemiology to look at whether a particular event, a particular condition is associated with autism. And the changes of many of these factors over time certainly contributed to the rise in prevalence of autism. And I showed in the previous slide, vaccines does not cause autism, but why do people still think they do? So I'm not going to go into the complex answer. The website at the bottom of the slide, you can go there and read up all about it. This is the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. They put out really nice resources to summarize some of these reasons over time, where the misconceptions come from, how does it persist. But we do know, based on very, very strong and consistent scientific evidence, that vaccines do not cause autism. And we also know that there's no scientific evidence that says Tylenol causes autism. And again, from there is the causation, where does causation come from, right? It's not just simply association. It's not just because you have more use of Tylenol and that coincided with the increase of autism, you could say that's a cause of autism. Causation basically needs a lot more studies than just a simple association. So really, what causes autism, right? So it has been a study that the scientific community has spent a lot of effort looking into over decades of work. And I mentioned earlier that from the twin studies, we know there's a strong component of genetics to autism. And there are hundreds or even more than 1,000 genes that have been identified to be associated with autism. Again, that's at the population level, we're looking at association. And some of those have been studied more in depth with additional studies across disciplines that would allow us to attribute more causation. So we can say some of these genes are really, really high risk and causal for autism, and there's mounting evidence for that. But not all of them. A lot more research still need to be done. And obviously, there could be an environmental component as well, and many of those environmental factors are being looked at right now. And there obviously could be both, right? So when the genetics of an individual predispose them to this condition, and the environmental factor could be triggering that predisposition. So interaction between genetics and environment could be the cause of autism. And I'm afraid to say that we do not have a full answer of the cause of autism. And it's such a difficult thing to study, as I mentioned. It's a very heterogeneous condition, and it's a clinical diagnosis. It's not something as defined as to say, if you have changes in one gene, then you get this disease, right? So Rett syndrome is the condition I study a lot in my lab. It's a single gene disorder, meaning that if you have changes in that one gene, you are, 95% you have the disease. So there's a molecular diagnosis that can be more certain to say what caused it, in addition to the clinical observation and diagnosis. So this is really some thing that the entire research field is putting in a lot of effort to look into what causes autism. And the reason we're so fixated on the cause is that the more we know about it, the better we could come up with interventions or ways to help those individuals to alter the presentation to improve the quality of life of those individuals. So just to quickly conclude from what I showed superficially of the epidemiology side of it, affecting many, many individuals. You can say 3% of the children are affected by this condition now. And this is a big challenge for the entire community, right? So many people are affected, and there's a high cost associated with services to be provided to these individuals. And how we include those individuals in our community, how we support them, there's a lot to be done. And I want to emphasize the complexity of this condition that translate into complex need of these individuals. And this is really where we're focusing at the Waisman Center a lot of effort on going forward. Not just when you study the causes simply, when you study the biology behind it, but also how do you help those people. And then when we talk about this condition as children more in the past, what we are not paying enough attention is that these children grow up. If we think of 3% of the children are being affected now, when they age, become adult, that's where the biggest challenge lies nowadays. Because as a child, you get the services in the schools, and you get the medical services from your pediatrician and those specialists. As soon as you graduate from high school, all of those services disappear. And you still have the significant need you need to address on daily living, on all of these significant challenges you face. But we don't currently have a support system in our community. This is not talking about just Wisconsin. This is talking about across the nation, across the world. So the cost is such that if we don't pay attention early, then it's going to cost us even more later on. So to look at that, at the Waisman Center, as I mentioned, we focus on the causes, the consequences, and the ways to help these people, and we do that in an integrated way through research, service, community outreach, and training and education, talking about not just within the center, but training and education in the community. So that's really what we think when we engage the community, when we listen to the community, when we collaborate, when we work together, we could have a better understanding of the needs and we could better serve our community. And this is a major initiative at the center this year. We're going to launch a autism adult service at our center this year. And really what we're going to focus on is the daily living skills of these individuals, providing consultation to family, and all of these life skills and social skills. We want to help adults with autism at the Waisman Center through this service. So, be great to hear from all of you what ideas you have and how we can work together. And we are already talking to individuals through our community advisory board, but we understand we need to reach out broader and to talk to more people so that we can do a much better job to be successful in this area. And if you want to know more about autism, this is our annual community engagement event at the Waisman Center this Saturday. Come and learn everything about autism. And if you are thirsty for even more information, we have an autism hub at our center's website. Scan this QR code or go to our center and find the hub. And there's a lot more information there about what kind of researches we have, what services we have, and what community engagement events we have centered all around autism. So with that, I'll close the presentation and be happy to answer any questions you might have. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Very interesting talk and an important topic. You talked a lot about the complexity of the genetic and environmental potential causes, as well as the complexity of the treatment for such a heterogeneous condition or set of conditions. It seems like an ideal artificial intelligence case study. Are you doing that kind of research?
The short answer is yes. So you can't avoid it nowadays. And we are generating a lot of data. And the data across different modalities, right? There are the molecular side, the cellular side, the epidemiology side, there's a behavior side, brain imaging. We have all of those data. Actually, as a matter of fact, there's a signature research project at the center supported by the Intellectual and Disability Research Center grant we've held from NIH for 60 years. And that is the integration across these modalities. And the AI is one of the aims, a heavy aim, to integrate the data to extract patterns, right? So basically, what we're hoping for, many of us probably, is that these computers are going to be better at recognizing certain patterns that's hidden in the mountains of data that we have collected. So that's precisely what we're doing, and we don't have the answer yet. But hopefully either us, and there's many other research centers using such similar approach. So yes, the short answer is yes, and we hope we would gain novel insight there.
Should I hold it? No. Roberta Gassman, and thank you for being here. So the question I have is, since you did show that the diagnoses of autism are increasing, but not necessarily all people who have that diagnosis have an intellectual disability or limitation. So my question is, when you have interventions like therapists or OTs or PTs or teachers working with children who may not have an intellectual disability even though they have a diagnosis of autism, can we tell that with intervention over time, the symptoms become less severe and the performance is improved of the child?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. And there has been a lot of, so the reason you want to have the diagnosis early is that there's really strong evidence to demonstrate that if you intervene early, you have a better outcome. And there's the early Denver model that's basically provided behavior intervention early on. So yes, there are certain traits that can be helped when you have early behavior intervention. And there's a system, I'm sure many of you probably work in that system to provide that type of service when these individuals get early diagnosis. I forgot to mention on one of the slides earlier, right? So the early diagnosis is happening more now than before, both here in Wisconsin as well as across the nation. The benefit of the early diagnosis is precisely what you mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Dr. Chang, Janet Pereno. First, I want to just say thank you for speaking. As chair of our program committee, I spend a lot of my time chasing after people and try to get them to call me back. And when I call the general number for the director's office around the holidays, and I expected to talk to a bot or two, suddenly a male voice just answered, hello. And I was rendered speechless, which is pretty hard to do. So I just want to thank you for being so open, so helpful, and so willing to speak to us. My question is, talk about prevalence. I have two little boys in my life, a grandson and a great nephew, a grandnephew, both of whom are on the spectrum. And both of whom for their first year of life didn't display any abnormal intellectual capabilities or any symptoms of autism. And my niece particularly, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that shows that during the time that kids usually get their vaccines is often the time when autism presents itself. And so I'm just wondering if there's any, not causal necessarily, but even coincidental evidence about the timing of when autism presents itself along with vaccines.
Okay, so I'll give you a short answer and give you a longer answer. I'm not aware of such evidence, so that's the short answer. But the longer answer is that this is a very large spectrum. And when you talk about anecdotal, how representative it is, I think at the population level, that's something maybe we should look at in a scientific way. And that would help to say whether this particular anecdotal story would have general applicability across the entire population. So I think I would stop my speculation there because really that's not my expertise area. But I'm certainly not aware of anything. Right.
Hi, I'm Lisa Birkenthal, and I'm a retired genetic counselor, so I'm from your world. My question, and you touched on it a bit at the end, is what is being done in order to provide individuals with the ability to live independently? Because I think about the large number of young adults with autism, and I think about their families, and I think about the dignity of the affected individuals. With the proper support system, I can envision that there should be entire communities so that these affected individuals can live independently. Are we moving toward that?
That's a great question. And the short answer is that there's heterogeneity, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. There will be, for example, those 30 to 40% individuals with ID and autism, and it's unlikely that those individuals would be able to live independently. But we have the other end of the spectrum, and many of those individuals are at the very end of the spectrum are living independently. So when you move closer from the very end, where those already independent living, towards the more affected side, I'm sure there is a slice of it where those individuals we could help, and that's precisely what we're trying to do as well in the adult service. Once we have it established and we can broaden the service And yes, there are practices now, not just here, but across the nation, where you teach them independent living skills, you try to help them with transition to adulthood, you try to help them to make friends and train them how to do that type of thing in a family-centered way. And I'm a firm believer that there are going to be a percentage of those individuals we can, in the vision you have, to help.
Hi, I'm Larry Hans, and thank you for your talk. I'm wondering how much work is being done to try and normalize the percentage of kids that have autism since the 1960s test to the 2000 test to the 2022 tests. It seems that what you say, there's been an expansion of diagnostic criteria to include a spectrum, and there's been interest by public schools to have people be autistic because they get more money if they're autistic. But is there really an increase in the total number of people, or the percentage of kids that have autism since the 60s to now, or is it just from the expansion of the spectrum necessarily?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm happy to clarify. I said that those are contributing factors I listed, and not a single one could explain the whole thing. So what you're asking is to normalize, right? So unfortunately, it is impossible to normalize. But I would say there are, just because in the 1960s, you think it's a rare condition, you rarely use the diagnosis. You could see some children who are not necessarily typical, but you wouldn't give them an autism diagnosis. And now, being the society-defined norm, where we're more accepting, we're not putting a lot of stigma on that label, right? So if those individuals previously weren't giving the diagnosis in that particular fashion, but now they're getting it, you could say there are more now than before. So those are not accounted for by, parental age, by some of these biological factors, but simply because that this is now the new definition. And the definition has changed. I don't think you could normalize, but at the same time, you could say there are more because of that. And I would be, what's the right word, comfortable in saying that there are really more in that sense, personally.
How do you prove that?
And that's an interesting question. We could talk more afterward, but I think that's a longer discussion.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Dr. Chang. It was a fascinating subject. Hopefully people can come up afterwards if they have follow-up questions and some time. I hope everyone will join us next week when we hear from Judith Davidoff and Jason Joyce, who will speak about the history of newspaper as the Isthmus newspaper celebrates its 50th year. Without any other items for the good of the body, we are adjourned.